नमस्कार दोस्तों, वेलकम टू the 9th episode of Musical Musings, an interactive session series with musicians of our country. It has been an educative experience even for me, conversing with these such great maestros of our country, and I have been enriched with a lot of knowledge by talking to these wonderful artists. In this series, today I am joined by Pt.Shubhendra Rao. Shubhendra Ji he has spent most of his life in Delhi, but he belongs to Karnataka. He belongs to Bangalore, and he is originally from Mysore. So I have known Shubhendra Ji since my childhood. So without much of an introduction, because most of you know Shubhendra Ji, so I will invite him to join me in this conversation and share his thoughts about music, his musical life, his career, and his other projects. Just one moment, please.
Yeah.
Namaste.
Namaste, Dhananjay. How are you?
Thank you very much for taking out time and sharing your musical experiences, agreeing to share your musical experiences with me.
It's always a pleasure to, first of all, be on a platform that is being promoted by another musician. And as you said, yes, we both come from the same state. I have seen you since your childhood, and now I'm very, very proud of what you are doing and what you have achieved and the way you're singing and everything. So I'm very, very happy to be with you and everything.
Thank you so much for your blessings. I wanted to ask you in the beginning about your father, Pt.Shubhendra Rao. Because I have seen him when I was in Bangalore, when I was a kid. So I wanted to know more about Pt.Shubhendra Rao. Also, your mother, I think she used to play Saraswati Veena, if I am not mistaken.
Absolutely true.
About your parents little bit, then we can.
I think whatever we achieve in our lives, and I'm sure you will also agree, and I'm sure everybody agrees, that it's all because of what our parents put in.
Correct.
So I was very, very blessed to be born in this family where music was the center of the whole family. Music and Guru, these were the two centers of our family. My upbringing was completely based on that. My father was perhaps one of the earliest musicians from the south and from Karnataka and from Bangalore to come to the north way back in the late 1940s, when coming to Delhi was as adventurous as, say, going from here to the US or to Australia in these days. Perhaps it's easier to go to the US and other places these days, whether it's the US, Canada, or any part of the world. But in those days, coming to Delhi was 3 days by train. Now the story, it's a beautiful story of a person whose life changed because of one record. My father, in those days, my uncle and my father and my grandmother, they used to live together. From a not such a very, very prosperous background, they had their own difficulties in life. But there was a lot of love that they shared, and my uncle had already started learning the sitar. But, in Bangalore, very little. My father used to play this instrument called the bulbul taram. And then sometime late 1948-49, there was a national program of music on All India Radio. And one of my father's neighbors said, you should come and listen to this young musician who plays the sitar so beautifully. And who was it? None other than our Guru Pandit Ravi Shankar Ji, playing on All India Radio national program, one of the first broadcast of national program. And when my father heard that recording, that changed his life. At that time, he had just finished his graduation, which means he must have been about 21, 22. And when he heard the divine music, he said, I have to learn from him. I want to live only to learn from him. So, very, very fortunately, a few months later, Pandit Ravi Shankar Ji, our Guru, came to Bangalore to perform at the town hall in Bangalore. This concert was organized by a few, people who were very, very interested. Lita Ubekar Ji and her husband, Shivram, a few others. And my father went up to Guruji after the concert and said he wanted to learn from him. But, Guruji just laughed and said, well, if you have to learn, then you have to come to Delhi because I don't live in Bangalore. So that kind of struck in my father, and he said, if I have to go to Delhi, I have to go. And thanks to the support of my uncle and my grandmother, who said, no, you have to go, you should go. So they, despite their own financial difficulties, they made sure that my father could go to Delhi in late 1950. And he came to Delhi not knowing many people, and Delhi in those days, as I said, was completely different world for a South Indian especially. So he came to Delhi, started learning from Guruji right from the beginning, and 5-6 years that he lived here, he used to work in the mornings to have to earn some money. He used to work in the Congress office, and in those days he used to earn 50 rupees a month, and 50 rupees a month, out of which he used to send 25 rupees back to his mother and brother, and lived in Delhi with 25 rupees, living in Delhi, sometimes having only one meal a day, and in the Delhi winters, he didn't even have a sweater. But Guruji's love, and in those days, of course, Annapurna Ji's love, because, and I think that's what kept him very strong. He learned for 5-6 years here, built that strong Guru-Shishya relationship, and then went back to Bangalore and started teaching, started playing here and there, and he would every time invite Guruji to come to. And how did he organize the concerts? he would literally go from house to house, collect anything that people could afford to give, sometimes only 20 paise. So for months together, he would collect money. And when he had 150 rupees, when he had collected 150 rupees, he would write a letter to Guruji, an inland letter, saying, I have collected 150 rupees, now you can come and perform. And the amount of stories that I have, the amount of beautiful episodes between them, between him and Annapurna Ji, between him and Ali Akbar Khan Sahab, between him and Baba Alauddin Khan Sahab. These are all treasures that I have grown up with, and it's a beautiful, beautiful story of how he made Bangalore, Karnataka, and the rest, quite a bit of the South India, more aware of sitar, more aware of Pandit Ravi Shankar Ji's music by teaching, by performing concerts here and there, to the extent that his name itself became Sitar Ramarao. His name. So, of course, today in Bangalore, we have so many musicians, so many wonderful music festivals that are held. But in those days, this was not the case. This was a very predominantly, of course, Carnatic tradition that was so strong. But it was because of the efforts of people like my father that today, there is so much Hindustani music in Bangalore, in Mysore, in all these areas, because of the efforts. He taught so many students. Some of them even went on to win All India Radio competitions. So it is because of his efforts that today there is so much more North Indian Hindustani Sangeet, as well as especially sitar. And where it comes to my mother, yes, she, right from her childhood, she did practice the Saraswati Veena. She was a very good Veena player before she got married. In Mysore, she had learned under R.N. Dorswami Ji, a wonderful Veena player. And in my childhood, yes, I would listen to her practice sometimes. So we had both, sometimes my mother practicing and sometimes my father practicing. That's how I grew up.
So that means to say that your father was the first generation musician.
Yes, my uncle and my father, they were the first generation musicians. My grandmother, at a certain time, she used to, I believe, live in Pune. And that's how her love for North Indian music started. But professionally, for sure, it was my father who was the first generation musician in the
family. Yes, you had your father in the house playing guitar, practicing, learning from Kadiji. How did you develop it? Was it an automatic kind of, you felt, your father felt that you have something in you, but you had an interest? How this started?
I don't know. I mean, sometimes I think it is, music chose me and sitar chose me rather than I chose that. Right from a very, my mother, they all tell me that I could sing before I could talk. And swar gyan and everything else was, I had a perfect pitch right from very early childhood. And could even, because we used to live in a joint family, my father, my uncle, we used to all live in a joint family. So sometimes my father, there was music all the time in the house. My uncle practicing, mother practicing, sometimes my mother practicing, sometimes my aunt singing. Elder siblings, both my sister and my brother and my cousin, all learning the sitar. So there was music at home all the time, and I being the youngest in the family, perhaps from day one. So very, very early I could sing and I could recognize the notes and everything else. So they say that, before I could even sitar, I would play the sitar, with the sitar lying on the, like the veena, because it was too big for me to carry. So somewhere it must have been, yeah. So then, so in our house, music was like breathing, like eating, like drinking, and there was music. There was also all the time we lived music. I think it was a beautiful childhood.
So, when your father decided that now that you should go to Panditji, continue to, for the further talim. So, I think in 1990 you joined Panditji, if I'm not mistaken.
1980s, I moved to Delhi. Yes, I moved to Delhi. But in a certain sense, my learning from him started way before that. My first lesson, actually, if I can say, my first lesson from him directly was when I was 7 years old, which means much in the early 70s, mid 70s, is when I actually started learning from him. But my first memory, and this is, luckily captured in a good photograph too, my first memory of my life itself is the fact that once Guruji came home to meet my grandmother. He loved my grandmother very much also. So every time he came to Bangalore, which was at least once or twice a year, he would come to Bangalore. He would always in the evening and have a meal with my grandmother's cooking. And I still remember this was late 1968, so I must have been 3.5. Guruji had come home with Allara Khaji and Shubhendra Shankar, after whom I named actually. So they had come home, and in those days, as I said, I was not even 4 years old at that time, and I could not lift the sitar and hold it in the. So my father, being the proud father that he was, so he asked me to play this sargam that I could play. That's the first sargam that we are taught. This is in Yaman Kalyan. So, I kept it on the floor like the veena, and I played for Guruji and Allara Khaji. Guruji was very happy, of course, as a 3.5. Now I think it's time for you to hold the sitar in its correct position. So he sat down and put it in my, showed how to sit and hold it in the correct position. So in a way, that was my first lesson from him. Then a few years, every year that he used to come to Bangalore, I would play for him. He would check my progress and maybe suggest a few things. So my learning started right at that age. Then much later on, when I was in my early teens, when I could travel around on my own, say in the late 70s and early 80s, when I could travel around. You have to also understand that Guruji at that time was never in a city for more than a few days, traveling around the world, performing, one of the busiest artists of the world. So if he spent even 1 week in a city, that was all a big thing. So if he was in, say, Bombay or Delhi or Pune or wherever, Chennai, he would ask me to come to that city, whatever time that he had, and I would he would teach me in the mornings 2-3 hours, whatever. I would record those things or write down whatever he had taught and practice for the rest of the year. This went on for almost like 6 to 8 years, when I could for a long time, and then finally, when in 1984, finally I went to Delhi, because when I had just finished 1 year of my college, he said that he wanted to establish a kind of a gurukul in Delhi. He had just been allotted this house in Delhi. And the story again is that, people think that he was given this official bungalow after he became the member of the Rajya Sabha. But the fact is that, it was given to him much before he became the member of the Rajya Sabha. Again, I was a Asian Games, the part of the film Gandhi that he had done. So a lot of things right from those days. And then when he had composed music for the whole the Asian Games, not many people again know this, that he never charged a single penny for that. He always said that, doing anything for my country is my greatest honor. So, of course, the Asian Games, there's a spectacular song, Swagatam Ataswagatam, which became such a huge, beautiful, almost like a song, beautiful song, as well as the whole opening ceremony, of course, all. So, Madam Gandhi at that time, who was the Prime Minister, she was so happy. What can the country offer you? So he said, well, I don't have a base as such anywhere, because he was traveling and traveling and traveling. And he said, Delhi, I would like to establish this kind of a Gurukul. So I would love to have a kind of a residence where I can set this up with a few of my students. So that's how the story came. And when he got that house, immediately he called me and he said, now you shift to Delhi. To Delhi at that time, along with me, another beautiful musician, Partha Sarathi, the wonderful sarod player. We both started living there, and he would travel around the rest of the world, but in a year he would spend at least 3 months in a year, say 90 to 100 days based out of Delhi. And in those days, my Pato and my talim continues in that way.
We are too small to talk about Panditji because I think he is the complete musician that India has ever seen, if you ask me. It's my personal opinion. I think most of everyone will agree with me, because even today, when we travel abroad, most of the Western people, they don't recognize our music as Indian classical music or Hindustani music. They identify it that this is Ravi Shankar's music. I mean, what contribution in that sense? And the other part what I feel is the number of disciples he has trained, and he has, such a wonderful guru he has been. Today you take any big name or anybody's name who's a guitarist or a sarod player, obviously they tell that they have learned from Ravi. My question to you is, when you went to Delhi, even before that also you have learned. At that time, he was a phenomenon. Shankarji was Ravi Shankar. There cannot be any other adjective for that. So, how was your relationship with him? He used to teach you, how he used to, train you. How was his talim style?
When my Delhi days, as I said, I can divide my talim into many different phases. Right from my early, as I said, single digits, when I was in my single digits, it was different. Then, when I was traveling with him to different, that was a different set, whole different way of teaching. But like you said, when I moved to Delhi and we started, that learning was again very, very different. As a musician yourself, I'm sure you will understand the relation between the guru and the shishya. It's almost, it's so precious, it's so beautiful, it's so, there is such a sanctity in that relationship. It's very, very spiritual also. It's spiritual of the highest order. Guru, the word guru itself, meaning than just learning 10 ragas or 20 ragas, and to a guru itself will take you a lifetime, or maybe more. Not even one lifetime, many lifetimes. So, in a certain sense, when I started learning from him, I was like his grandson, because I was the son of his son. My father was his son, and I was his grandson, who also carried the same name as his own son. So there was a very deep relationship. So initially that was the relationship we shared, and it was beautiful to go through that kind of a strong relationship. And then when I started spending more time with him, and when I started slowly started playing with him also, and accompanying him, assisting him on his concerts, then the senior disciples from the 50s and 40s and 60s, they said he also had a temper. That sometimes, of course, not as much as his guru Baba Alauddin Khansa, but yeah, of course. Luckily, I came into his life when his temper he was in his 50s and 60s. He had seen it all and done it all. So it was a very beautiful time that I spent with him in those years. Sometimes, I can, just to show you a few incidents as to how the talim would happen. Once I still remember Partho, that is, and me, we were just two of us, and around 11:30, 12, he said, I think I'm going to rest now. So he went to his bedroom. So we said pranam, and we went to our small rooms, and I think it was around 12:30. I had the habit of reading before sleeping. So I was reading, and suddenly I heard Guruji's door. Suddenly I heard Pt.Shubhendra, and I was like, what happened? This is around 1 o'clock in the night. I thought he must need some water or something like that. So I rushed, and then he said, I don't know why I'm not able to sleep. Why don't you bring your reading? So started teaching at 1 o'clock in the night. Until 3:30, 4 o'clock, the bihag that he taught us that day. So, something like that, or, sitting at the dining. And Guru is not teaching you only with your. Guru is teaching you 24/7. He is testing you, he is challenging you, he is guiding you, he is relationships of your life. So I see a question, if I could share. A student of mine, Pratibha, is asking. So maybe I would like to share that.
Sure.
So that, again, any interaction with him was always a lesson. Even sitting at the dining table, the tal ka, things like that, or some rag or something, some chalan, going for a also music, and not necessarily all the time music, but how to be an artist, what it takes to be a complete artist. And so honestly, if I start writing my feelings, I can fill up a few books and still not speak enough about the greatness of his music, the greatness of him as a guru, and and his contribution to the world of music. I mean, you spoke about him taking Indian music to the rest of the world and everything else. For me, it is that, his music or his contribution is no less than, people like Beethoven or Mozart or whatever, actually even more, in my opinion, because he took music to the rest of the world. He made them understand it. He made them respect it. And just not across the world, even within India itself. Yes.
Just sorry to interrupt you. Sorry to interrupt you. Recently, there was an interview of Pt.Shubhendra Ji on the Facebook, where he has mentioned that what Ravi Shankar Ji did to Indian music is that Beatles, one of the greatest musicians of this world has seen, they used to consider Ravi Ji as their guru. I mean, there cannot be nothing, more to Indian classical music. And that is possible only because of Pandit Ji.
The Beatles are just perhaps the most famous names that one would take into consideration. But even classical musicians, whether it was Yehudi Menuhin, whether it was Rostropovich, whether it was John Coltrane, whether it was, not a single musician can say that he or she is not influenced by this music. Here, this is something I really want to stress. We only talk about his taking Indian music outside India, but even within India, the status of a classical musician to be accepted in society, the way he brought up the whole status of classical musicians, he gave so much respectability to the whole, to the tabla players, bringing them to the limelight, giving them the due recognition that they deserved. And his contribution to, not today because of the COVID, of course, but, we. I mean, 5 lakhs, 10 lakhs, traveling in 5 lakhs, staying. Classical.
Shubhendra Ji, I think there is some technical issue
level of the classical musicians, even within India. Otherwise, previously, classical musicians, were not given the same, as much of a respect in society. So, his contribution, I said, unmatched, and will be unmatched for many, many, many centuries.
And many of the senior musicians in India, like Shivji, in that interview, in the same interview, he has many times Ravi Shankar Ji, Pandit Ji, and said that people like him were taken outside India for the first time by Ravi Shankar.
Absolutely, all of them, Shivji, Hariji, L. Subramanian Ji, Sultan, and let's not go into the number of tabla players whom he is.
Shubhendra Ji, I think there is issue.
Every artist directly, or are you able to keep it?
Yeah, two, three times, it got,
okay.
Buffering, started buffering.
That's the problem with in this COVID times. Is it okay now? I'm not sure whether you're able to hear.
It's getting sometimes, breaking in between.
Usage of the internet across the world now, it's, I think, creating problems sometimes. So his contribution, today, I think his contribution is no less, if not more. Maybe I should reconnect. Should I reconnect?
Yeah, please. I'll reconnect you once again. You are just. I'll sorry, friends, for this. Some technical issues. I'm unable to connect Ji. 1 minute. Shubhendra Ji. Yeah. I'll connect once again. Yeah. Yeah. We can now connect.
Is this okay?
Yeah.
Okay now?
Again, it's giving some problem.
So if you don't mind, just give me 1 minute. I'll just reconnect my Wi-Fi. Just little.
Sure.
Sometimes you just need to restart the thing. So just give me less than a minute. I'll.
Yes, friends, there are some technical issues with in this conversation. But here I would like to mention one incident which I personally had with Pandit Ravi Shankar Ji. I will not forget that moment in my life because one of the organizations in Bangalore, Sur Sagar, had organized Ravi Ji's concert, and one of the Shubhendra Ji was on sitar accompaniment, and I happened to be one of the scholarship holder of that. Sursagar used to give scholarships to the young artists, and I was one of them. So, and I received that scholarship from Panditji. And when I touched his feet, I can't express in words what feelings I had. Like the experience is, it cannot be expressed in words. So just to keep you in this one story which I had about Panditji. Now I try to connect with Shubhendra Ji. 1 minute. Yeah, please.
Problem. But I'm sitting very close to the Wi-Fi router also. But it's just one of these things that you can't help, unfortunately. So, Dhananjay, yeah, I mean, please.
Yeah. Just sorry to interrupt you. Can you tell a little bit about the instrument itself? Because there are so many people who we all go to concert, we listen to the concert, we don't know what is the instrument made of. Like, we don't know, sometimes we don't know how things it has. Basic knowledge about the instrument. It would be helpful for everyone.
See, today in the last decades, it's become when you say a sitar, when you go to a shop and want to buy a sitar, the first question they will ask is, do you play Pandit Ravi Shankar Ji style or do you play Ustad Khan? So it has become now very established that we have two kinds of sitars. Both are sitars structurally in the size as well as in the kind of strings that we use. So whatever explanation I'm giving is Shankar style of sitar. So basically this style of instrument has two what we call the tumba or the gold. One is the bigger one and one is the smaller one. The smaller one is detached. You can screw it in and you can take it out as and when. So, and the number of strings is varies between, say, some between 17 to 20 strings. And the beauty of Indian string instruments is that we have two layers of strings. The playing strings on the top, and underneath the playing strings we have what we call the taraf or the sympathetic strings. So two layers of strings, and most Indian string instruments, whether it is sarod, whether it is sarangi, now even the cello that Saskia plays, so it's got two levels of strings. Strings, two of them are what we call the melodic strings, and three the rhythm strings or the chikari strings. Out of these four melody strings, the main string is a steel wire, then the second or the joda is a bronze. Then the beauty of Guruji's style of playing as well as the sitar was the depth of the kharaj pancha or the bass, like the surbahar, almost like the surbahar. So this particular instrument always had two, kharaj and the pancham, where you could go and explore the depth of the drupad style of playing, the beenkar drupad. So that is the kharaj and pancham, and as I said, three rhythm strings. The strings underneath, as I said, are called the taraf or the sympathetic strings, and they are normally the steel, and they resonate when you tune those strings to the notes that you're playing on the top playing strings. Where it comes to the big tumba or the big gourd, it's made of pumpkin. And special that are specially to be made into music instruments, and certain regions of Maharashtra and other places, where what they do is they carve out the inside of the pumpkin so that it becomes hollow, and they keep that gourd in water for a few months or sometimes in a few years. Then they put it in the sun for a few years to make them strong, and only those that are strong can then be finally used to make a sitar. On the top, what the kind of wood, it's called a tun or a kind of a teak. So, structurally, that is about the simplest way of explaining the sitar.
Now, coming to Pandit ji has done several collaborations with Western musicians, and also many call it as East marries West or something like that.
East meets West.
Yeah, East meets West. But in your personal life, it's East marries West.
Yes.
So, I would like to know more about how did you meet Saskia ji, because I have heard your Jugalbandi many times. The West and East, hello. How did you come to know each other? How did you meet each other? And how did you
Saskia is basically an Indian musician. She of course trained initially as a Western classical musician also, because the cello is a Western classical instrument. But in the last 25 years, she's totally devoted to Indian music, Indian classical music. She has introduced this new instrument called the Indian cello. Mohan Bhatt ji created the Mohan Veena, or Yushrini created the mandolin for Carnatic music. Kadri Gopalnath ji introduced the saxophone. Similarly, Saskia has introduced a new instrument called the Indian cello. And this is completely only for Indian music. So, so when we talk of her, I don't think we are East marries West, not in the musical sense.
Yeah.
Of course, she has both the traditions. So when we do our Jugalbandi, or when we perform, whether it is Dover Lane music or whether, Saptak or anywhere else, we only play Indian classical music. It's completely raga, and yeah. We are also composers, and we like to extend the boundaries sometimes. So we compose our own music, which is both Indian and beyond. So where it comes to how we met, I think again her to Indian music. I think sometime you can talk to her directly yourself.
Yeah.
Her journey to Indian music, but I see a lot of parallel between her and my father. Meaning, his journey from South Indian music to North Indian music in the 40s and 50s is similar to Saskia's journey from Western music to Indian music in the 90s and 2000s, and so for the last 26, 27 years, she has devoted herself to Indian music. So East marries West. Yeah, Guru had done this beautiful collaboration with Yahoo. We called it the East. And when Saskia and I started performing together, and sometimes, especially in Europe or in North America, when you're playing in a music festival, they always want to know the name of your band. Even so, we were thinking what to call ourselves, and we said, let's call it East Marries West, because Guruji had. Now the meeting has also become a marriage. So that's just a a thought, and it's just something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Topic which I want you to talk a little bit about is your you and Saskia ji has undertaken. That's
right
for us.
Right.
If we can talk about it for a little while.
No, that's wonderful. I'm very, very happy to. It's because it's become our passion. It's become our mission. Sangeet for all. I think the name itself says it. It's music for everyone. Music for every child. Our passion is to learn the foundation of classical music, Indian classical music, before the age of 10. You see, I think the most important, to bring about an effective change, it's very difficult to influence even a 12-year-old child, or a 15-year-old, or a 25-year-old, or a 40-year-old, in that mass level. So if you really want to bring about a change in society, I think we should start young. And the youngest, obviously, the age between 0 to 9 is the most crucial age in every human being. So again, Saskia, with her initial Western classical background, where there is a proper methodology of teaching to a child, to a very young child. So she has written India's own music curriculum. It's a full curriculum that can be adopted by any school in the country, because we believe that every child should learn music education. And it's not only about learning a sitar or based on a certain rag, but music has to be an integral part of every child's growth. And the best way to do it is to introduce it in schools as a subject, not as an extracurricular activity. And music, through music, we can teach what did Plato say, what did Rumi say, what did Rabindranath Tagore say, what did all these great people, even Osho, everybody has spoken about the music. And so we believe that music should be an integral part of every child's growth. So right now, as we speak, almost 30,000 children are following this curriculum in their schools. Sangeet for all, and they are loving to learn music. Once we put that love for them, not to say that every child who studies music will go on to become a musician. Just like every child who learns mathematics a mathematician, or a child who learns is not going to become a scientist. Similarly, the expectation to think that every child who learns music should only become a musician, that should not be there. Music helps build your character, build your sensitivity, and also roots you to your culture. So we believe, and that's why we believe that music should be the birthright of every child. So so now this has become like a movement. We have initiated this movement to take these schools. We want the government, we want musicians like you and everybody who's listening to whatever I'm trying to say to join this movement so that we can make our children better human beings. We can make them more musical, and that will help them in their later years in a way that, why do we see that no musician is a terrorist? Why do we see that all musicians, they have a different wavelength? So it doesn't necessarily have to mean that you have to become a musician, but sensitivity towards music helps every person become a better human being. So we have this whole system of teaching music in a classroom. We are not there to replace the guru, because the ultimate is the guru. But in a classroom scenario, if you ask me to 25, 40 children every day, I won't be able to do that, because I'm a teacher. To be a music educator, you need to understand a lot more than just learn music. So we are doing the train the trainer program. Saskia has written some beautiful books for children in the form of stories, so that children can read them as stories, but there is a lot of knowledge that is passed on through those stories. So almost 30,000 children are following it now. To become 3 lakhs, to become 3 million, to become every child should learn music in their school. So this is Sangeet for all for you.
That's really amazing to think like that. That that every child, whether, as you said, that they may not become performing artists.
Not at all.
They become good human beings, because music really calms down people. Everything. I mean, music has a very great quality.
During this huge problem that the whole world is facing, mental anxiety, there's so much tension, there's so much arts that is keeping them, sane. Otherwise, the world would have been insane by now.
Yeah. Another one I wanted to ask you was, what changes would you like to see regarding classical music or any music? Because I know that you had faced twice or thrice airlines breaking your visa. It's really pains, for an artist. It's your part. It's part of the sitar is part of Shubhendra.
Absolutely.
So when a part is cut off, you know what the pain is. So how far you see there can be some improvement in this? And do you think there can be some improvement?
There can be a lot of improvement, obviously, but we need to make a start. We need,
Yes.
as I said, if there is that sensitivity that we give to people, then there will naturally be that change that will come. So, where it comes to my own instrument and airline saga, the stories of my instruments, I have been unfortunately the victim many times. Uh, I'm still fighting for the cause, of course, my own cause, but at the same time the cause of all musicians, to who have every musician has a story about he or she suffering bad handling by airlines. And this is where I have made an appeal. I have now gone to the minister. I have even spoken to the Secretary, Ministry of Civil Aviation. I have put a lot of things to try and say that we need more support, more sensitivity, and more rules that will support artists rather than only support the. And even yesterday we were talking about trying to make music, classical music, as an industry, so that we are able to have a single voice. We should all come together. We should all, it's not about Dhananjay Hegde, or it's not about Saskia, or it's not about X, Y, Z. It's about the music and the musician coming together for, to make a life better for all of us. So yes, the only plus point for me during this COVID's last 3 months of lockdown is the fact that my instrument has not been broken because I have not traveled. Otherwise, literally almost every year I have one story to add to that, which is very unfortunate. Because, even after many incidents of so many musicians, not just in India, across the world, why can't we be more musicians and musical instruments?
Very true, Shubhendra Ji. I think we had a very good discussion about your traveling with Pandit Ji and your own journey as a musician and your Sangeet for All project. And so I thank you a lot for coming on my show, and it's related to music, because problems we face as musicians, because one of the major with this conversation is that people don't understand, the audience don't understand what we go through, like what an artist goes through, what problems we face, what problems we face from the organizers also, sometimes from the airlines, like what you told now. Last year, to USA, your first concert, you have already reached the town and your sitar is broken.
Yeah.
How an artist can go through this kind of mental agony and stress?
Absolutely. I think the joy and the mental comfort and so many things that music and arts gives needs more respect and deserves more attention from the government, from the private sector, from the society in general.
Yes.
Can one without any of the art forms?
Yes. Very difficult.
It will be such. I think the world will the world will crash within a week. Maybe we should do that. 1 week lockdown of all forms of art.
Yes,
I don't know.
To understand the value of the art.
Yes. Yeah.
So we are almost we are completing our time. Thank you once again.
Thank you very much, Dhananjay. All the best to you. And I have to say that I saw your son play the tabla on Facebook. Wonderful. Yeah. The next generation is getting ready.
Yeah.
So all the best to you, and thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you all the viewers for coming and watching the show. This show will be available on Facebook page of Music and Musings after 1 or 2 days. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.